Hello and welcome back to the Real Estate Regroup Show. I am your host, LJ Walker. Well, guys, I was looking at the New York City fire movement over on my WhatsApp, and I saw where they mentioned that one of our mayoral candidates, who used to be our governor, Cuomo, he has some interesting ideas as far as when it comes to rent stabilization in New York City. You see, one of the things that he mentioned was this. He mentioned that there are people who are living in rent stabilized apartments who are making six figures, if not more, which, by the way, is actually true. Okay. He also had an issue with the fact that a lot of times when rent stabilized apartments do become empty, instead of them going to someone else as a rent stabilized apartment, the landlords jack the rent up by 20% and then rent it to someone who does not need for the rent to be so low or affordable, if you will. So he did, when he was a governor, he did make a change. He did stop landlords from raising the rent by 20%. And the cap is this: as a landlord of a rent stabilized building, you can only raise the rent by 2%, and that's only if repairs are needed. He definitely got some pushback on that because a lot of landlords are saying, well, just because you have those who take advantage of the system, that doesn't mean that all landlords should be punished. And that 2% cap, sometimes it is too low because you do have people who really damage the apartment. Sometimes they do it on purpose, but some people, as a matter of fact, a lot of people do it because they don't know any better. They don't know how to keep an apartment. So he's gotten pushback on that. And in some ways, it's a sneak attack on our other mayoral candidate, Mr. Mamdani. I hope I'm saying his name right. You see, Mr. Mamdani lives in a rent stabilized apartment and he makes $142,000 a year. He pays $2,300 a month rent. I know some of you who are not from New York City, you're like, wow, that's a lot of money. That's New York. $2,300 is actually affordable. Okay? So here's the situation. You might say to yourself, well, how is it that a person who makes six figures or more is living in a rent stabilized apartment? Isn't that for people who are of moderate wealth, who are middle income, the middle class? Okay, so here's the thing. In New York, if you make 100,000, you're not really considered middle class. You're actually considered poor. Okay, then the next issue is this. What happens is sometimes, and this is what Mamdani claims, is that when he got the apartment, he was only making $40,000 a year. It wasn't until years later he kept changing his jobs and what have you, and now he's making the $142,000. But before, when he first got the apartment, that's not how it went. The other way that I know that this happens is this. Sometimes parents, before they pass away, they will put their children's name on the lease so that this way, when they die, because their child's name is on the lease, the child automatically will get the apartment. Here's the thing. A lot of times they don't check the income of the child, and sometimes that child makes a whole lot more. Sometimes also that child actually does not live in the apartment, but they'll keep the apartment. And if whether the lease permits it or not, they will go ahead and sublet the apartment. they will sublet it to someone, and it won't be an affordable price. It will be at market rate price. So, meaning it'll be like a $3,000 or $4,000 apartment, depending on, or even more, depending on how many bedrooms and the location. That's what a lot of people do. But they'll turn around and play the landlord the rent stabilized price. Okay. The other thing is, as I mentioned, a lot of times when an apartment becomes empty, it doesn't always go to someone who's making middle income. A lot of times it'll go to someone who can afford to pay market rent. And in the city, there is a crisis as far as affordable rent. And to many people, honestly, in New York, to many people, $2,300 is not affordable. It's considered affordable, but to many, it's not affordable. So I would like to know from you guys, do you think the law is fair? Do you think that before an apartment is transferred over to the child, that there should be a requirement where they look at the child's income to make sure that the child is more, between, let's say, 30 and 80,000, as opposed to someone who is over $100,000 to take over their parents' apartment? Should they do that? Is it fair for a landlord who paid for the building with their own money and probably did not get a grant from the city to take an apartment that's now vacant and sell it, or rent it rather, at market rent? Even though, no, correction, sometimes they don't rent it. Sometimes they do sell the apartment as a condo or co-op. That's happened also. But do you think that it's right for them to do that? Or should they be forced to make it stay a rent stabilized apartment and find someone else who can afford that particular rent? Do you feel as though it is fair for landlords to raise the rent 20% to the new person who's going to take over the property? Or do you think the 2% only if there's repairs is fair? What are your thoughts? Comment below. Let me know what you think. Please share this amongst your friends. Remember, each one reach one, teach one. Bye for now. Until next time, have a good night.